Emily Tran zipped up her hoodie and slung her backpack over one shoulder. The early sun spilled over the quiet neighborhood, painting the picket fences gold and lighting the mist clinging to the lawns. Birds chirped. A lawn sprinkler hissed somewhere down the street. It was, by all accounts, a normal morning. Emily turned toward the kitchen. Heading out. "Mom!" she called. Her mother poked her head out from behind the fridge door. "Got your lunch?" "In the bag." "Homework?" "Done." "Shadow?" "I let him out already." From the backyard, a low bark answered. Emily smiled faintly. "He says hi. Tell him not to dig up the garden again." No promises. She stepped out the door and jogged down the driveway. The air was crisp, the concrete cool under her sneakers. Waiting at the end of the street was the familiar yellow school bus. Engine humming, idling in place. Same driver, same bus number, same routine, but something felt off. Shadow was watching her from the gate. The retired K9 was still a powerhouse of muscle and focus despite his graying muzzle. He wasn't just any dog. He had been her father's partner, on patrol, in raids, during long cold nights behind the badge. After the funeral, Shadow hadn't left the door for days. Then one night, he laid down beside Emily's bed and stayed there ever since. He wasn't the cuddliest, didn't fetch, didn't do tricks, but he watched, always watched. Today was no different. Until it was. Emily was 5 feet from the bus stop when Shadow bolted. No bark, no warning, just motion. A blur of black and tan fur as he sprinted down the lawn. Over the curb. Right for her. "Shadow?" Emily gasped. He didn't slow down. He launched straight at her, clamping his jaws around the sleeve of her hoodie and yanking with a force that spun her sideways. She fell hard, knee scraping on the pavement. Palms burning. "What the hell?" she cried out, twisting to pull away. Shadow stood over her, body rigid, tail low, ears flattened. He wasn't playing. He was guarding. Emily looked up, toward the bus. The driver hadn't moved. Not a flinch. Not even a blink. He sat perfectly still, hands on the wheel, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. "Hello?" Emily called out. "Sir?" No answer. Then, silently, the bus doors hissed shut. The engine revved. And the bus rolled forward, without her. It didn't speed, didn't jerk, just pulled away like everything was fine. Emily stared after it, heart pounding. "What is going on?" she whispered. Shadow let go of her sleeve and positioned himself between her and the road. Body tense, gaze fixed on the bus as it disappeared around the corner. Back at the house, Emily's mom looked up from the sink when they returned. "What happened?" she asked. "You're back already?" Shadow dragged me off the sidewalk, Emily said, voice shaking. "He pulled me away from the bus. And it just drove off." Her mom frowned. "Did it not stop?" "It stopped. I was walking to it." "Did the driver say anything?" "No." "Did you fall?" He pulled me. He bit my sleeve and yanked me down." Her mom dried her hands and came over. "Are you hurt?" "No, just scraped." They looked down at Shadow. He sat near the door, breathing steadily, tongue hanging slightly out. His eyes were locked on Emily. Watching. "I don't know why he did it," Emily muttered. "He's never done anything like that." Her mom's brow furrowed. "Did you see the driver's face?" "No. Glasses. But something felt wrong." Her mother went quiet for a beat. Then, "Come inside. I'll call the school." 30 minutes later, Emily sat at the kitchen table with a cold pack on her knee. Shadow lay under the table, pressed close to her legs. Her mother returned with her phone. They said the bus arrived at school, but there were 3 kids who never showed up. "You're one of them." Emily looked up sharply. "What? They're contacting the other parents now." "Did anyone say what happened?" "No, the school's trying to reach the driver. They haven't been able to." Emily stared out the window. Shadow's sudden burst of action made no sense, unless he'd seen something she hadn't. Something subtle, a scent, a posture, a signal. After all, Shadow wasn't just a pet. He was trained to detect danger. Her father used to talk about it. "Trust the dog," he'd say, "even when you don't understand why." Especially then. It echoed now, clear as a bell. "Trust the dog." Emily looked down at Shadow. He was still watching her. Eyes sharp, unblinking. And for the first time since her dad died, she felt the ghost of something deeper than grief. A thread pulling her toward something she didn't fully understand. But she trusted it. She trusted him. Emily didn't say much for the rest of the morning. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor, arms folded across her chest. Phone silent beside her. Shadow paced the hallway, then returned to her. Then paced again. She didn't meet his eyes. Not yet. She was angry, embarrassed, confused. He had tackled her. In front of the bus. In front of other kids. Now her mom was acting like something terrible had happened. But no one could say exactly what. The school was still calling parents. The bus driver hadn't been found. 3 students were marked absent. Emily stared at the faint scrape on her palm. It didn't hurt, but it meant something, and she didn't know what. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Campbell from next door, holding a reusable grocery bag and curiosity in her eyes. "Just wanted to drop off a few things," she said brightly, glancing past Emily's shoulder. "I heard about this morning. Everything all right?" Emily nodded. "Yeah." The old woman stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I told Helen, you know the lady across the street, that those retired K9s. Well, sometimes they just snap. Years of tension in like springs waiting to go." Emily's jaw tightened. "He didn't snap." Mrs. Campbell tilted her head. "Sweetheart, it dragged you off the sidewalk. He saved me." The words surprised Emily even as she said them. Mrs. Campbell blinked. "Well, you just stay careful. That kind of training doesn't go away. Even when the badge does." She handed over the bag and walked off, muttering about dogs and instincts. Emily shut the door a little harder than she needed to. Shadow sat at the foot of the stairs, ears pinned back, tail low to the ground. She finally looked him in the eye. "You didn't go crazy," she whispered. His body language said it all. He wasn't proud. He wasn't defensive. He was shaking, not out of fear, but something else. Something like shock. She crouched down slowly. Shadow pressed his nose to her hand. His ears were still flat. His tail didn't wag. But he didn't pull away. That night, after her mom went to bed, Emily tiptoed down the stairs in socks and opened the hall closet. Inside was the old memory box, labeled in her father's neat handwriting, Shadow, Training and Partner Records. She dragged it out and opened the lid. Inside, certificates, photos, logbooks, an old clicker, worn ID tags. She set him aside carefully until she found what she was looking for. USB drive, house cam backup. Her dad had wired a security cam to face the street years ago. Backup recordings looped every 72 hours. Unless saved. Emily plugged it into her laptop. She scrolled to the right timestamp. 8:12 a.m. Front yard. She hit play. The footage showed herself walking toward the bus. Shadow running after her, grabbing her hoodie. She saw herself fall. The bus, number 306, sat still. And then she looked closer. The driver. He never moved. He didn't react when she fell. Didn't look toward her. Didn't flinch. Didn't even blink. She leaned in, squinting at the screen. Her breath caught. The driver's head turned, just slightly, and the angle shifted, catching his face in the side mirror. Only, it wasn't a face. Not really. It was too smooth, too blank, like someone had painted the idea of a human face onto plastic. The mouth was too straight. The skin too uniform. The eyes too wide. A mannequin. A doll. No pause. No expression. No life. Emily's stomach twisted. She paused the frame. Stared at it. And then, a growl rumbled beside her. Low. Long. She looked down. Shadow was staring at the screen. Hackles raised. His teeth barely bared. Shadow, she said softly. He didn't take his eyes off the image. She rewound. Played it again. The growl returned. Louder now. His chest rose with each breath. It was the first time he'd made that sound in years. Not since the night her father died. Emily's fingers hovered above the keyboard. You saw it, didn't you? Shadow looked up at her. Then back to the screen. She zoomed in on the mirror. That uncanny reflection stared back at her. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just a malfunction. This wasn't a weird driver. Something was wrong. And Shadow knew it. The next day at school. The official story was, driver health issue. A substitute would be filling in. The kids who missed the bus. Wrong stop, the office said. But Emily had ridden that bus for 3 years. It didn't have wrong stops. She didn't argue, she just nodded and walked away. That evening, she sat with Shadow in the backyard. Laptop on her knees. Camera still paused at that impossible reflection. She thought of all the times her father had said, "Listen to Shadow, even when no one else does." He wasn't just a dog. He was a partner, a protector, and he'd seen something no one else noticed, because no one else looked. Everyone missed the smooth face. Everyone missed the way the driver didn't blink. Everyone missed the fact that 3 students never showed up, and never came back. But Shadow didn't miss anything. Not then. Not now. And Emily wasn't going to. Either. It started with a creak in the ceiling. Emily paused on the second step of the attic ladder. Flashlight in her mouth. Backpack slung tight over her shoulder. The old wooden beams groaned in the evening heat, like they were trying to speak a language only memory understood. Shadow waited below. Front paws on the first step. Eyes locked on her like a sentinel. She pulled herself up. The attic hadn't changed in years. Still smelled like dust and pine. Half-filled boxes. Christmas ornaments. Her old tricycle with a bent wheel. And near the back, pushed behind a tarp and an old tarp-covered workbench, her father's footlocker. She knelt beside it. It was locked with a rusted combination dial. But she didn't need to guess. Her father's badge number, 4426. The latch clicked. Inside, files, folders, photos, tightly packed rows of documentation, field reports, laminated maps, dog training manuals, some labeled confidential. She flipped through the binders until she found what she was hoping for. A small leather notebook, black, worn smooth at the edges, held shut with a rubber band. The cover read, Shadow, Tactical Behavior Log. Trainer, Officer Daniel Tran. She sat cross-legged on the floor and opened it. Page after page of precise handwriting. Tracking everything. Obedience drills. Scent training. Exposure sessions. Reaction times under duress. The kind of work only K9 units could understand, and the kind of bond that couldn't be faked. Then she found the last page. It was dated 3 weeks before his death. Her father's handwriting had shifted, sharper, faster, like he'd been in a rush. It read, Shadow responded aggressively to object in warehouse. No visible threat. No sound. No scent. No one else noticed. Team dismissed it as phantom alert. Minutes later, drone revealed. Optical camouflage. Cloaked. Silent. Shadow saw it. Somehow. If he reacts to something with no smell, trust him. Always. DT. Emily read it again. Then a third time. Her throat was dry. The page before it described a SWAT operation in the city. Routine sweep of an abandoned building. Shadow had halted at the threshold. Growling, refusing to enter. The team ignored him. He lunged toward an empty corner. Seconds later, a military-grade quadrotor drone shimmered into visibility, seconds from triggering a pressure mine. Shadow saved them all, not by scent, not by sound, by sense, by something no one else could feel. Emily stared at the final line. If he reacts to something with no smell, trust him. Her hands trembled as she closed the notebook. Downstairs. She sat on her bed. Notebook in her lap. Her father's words looping in her mind. Shadow lay at her feet. Curled tightly, eyes wide open. He didn't have a smell. She said aloud. The driver. In the footage. Shadow hadn't barked at him. He had barked at what he wasn't. No smell, no blink, no presence. Not human. Emily remembered watching that bus leave. Remembered the quiet, the stillness, the artificial face in the mirror. Shadow hadn't saved her from a driver. He'd saved her from something wearing a human shape. She pulled out her laptop and opened the camera footage again. this time frame by frame. She paused at the exact moment the driver's reflection came into view. Magnified. Studied it. It looked real, if you didn't look too closely. But now that she knew what to search for, it was obvious. No blink. No breath. Just a rubber still stare. A mask. A copy. Something pretending. She flipped to the middle pages of the notebook. Her dad had written dozens of case notes. But one stood out, circled in red ink. Behavior anomaly. Shadow refuses to track subjects that don't register. Reacts physically, but not chemically. No scent markers. Eyes track. Nose does not. And then below that, possible link to deep tech. Unregistered drones. Synthetic decoys. Who builds these? Emily felt her chest tighten. This wasn't about rogue tech or malfunctioning bots. Something bigger was going on. The next day at school, she kept her head down. Rumors swirled about the missing kids. Probably skipped. Wrong stop. No big deal. But one of them, Dev Patel, sat behind her in math class every day. He'd never missed a day. Not once. And now he was gone. And nobody cared. Nobody but her. That afternoon, Emily spread the notebook pages across her desk like pieces of a puzzle. She drew a timeline on a sheet of graph paper. Week -3, shadow alerts to invisible drone. Saved team. Week 0, bus incident. No scent. No blink. Shadow intervenes. Day +1, 3 students vanish. No report filed. Day +2, replacement, driver. All normal again. She circled a question. Where do the missing go? Then added another. Why mimic the driver? And one more. How did Shadow know? She turned to him now. He sat in the doorway, watching her like always. You saw something, she said. Something I didn't, just like before. His ears perked. Emily reached down and scratched behind them gently. I trust you. She didn't sleep that night. Her dreams were full of windows that didn't open, faces that didn't move, and voices that said nothing. At 3:14 a.m., she woke with a start. Shadow stood by the window, growling. Emily had never been inside a police station before. It wasn't how she pictured it. No shouting, no handcuffs, just quiet typing, tired coffee, and too many laminated safety posters. She sat on a bench near the side wall. Shadow pressed tightly against her legs. A few officers walked by and eyed the German Shepherd. But no one said anything. Maybe it was the canine harness she'd buckled on him this morning, the one her father used to use. It still had his old tag clipped to the side, DTK 94426. Eventually, a door opened. Emily. Officer Mason stood in the hallway. Weathered but steady, the lines on his face deeper than she remembered. He'd been at her father's funeral. They hadn't talked since. She stood. Thanks for coming, she said. I should have come sooner. In his office. She handed him the USB drive. Watch it, please. He plugged it into his desktop and clicked play. The bus. The still driver. The reflection in the side mirror. Emily waited for a reaction. Mason leaned in, frowning. Pause that. He zoomed in on the reflection. No blink. He muttered. Too smooth. He rewound it again. Slower. You saw this? He asked. Shadow did. Mason looked down at the dog, who sat completely still, eyes fixed on the screen. Your dad used to say this one was half ghost. Mason said softly. He trusted him more than any human. Emily nodded. All right, Mason said. Let's see what I can find. It took 2 hours to get access to traffic records, transit logs, and state DMV databases. Mason knew what strings to pull. Emily sat beside him, bouncing her leg. Shadow curled at her feet. No record of that plate. Mason said. No route assigned to that bus ID. The driver's uniform isn't in our system. And he tapped a screen. This is the security footage from the school gate that morning. The bus never entered, but I saw it leave. Emily said. I watched it drive off. Then it vanished somewhere between your street and the first stoplight. He looked at her. This wasn't a school bus. Emily's voice was tight. Then what was it? They drove in silence for the next hour, Mason at the wheel of his unmarked SUV. Emily in the passenger seat. Shadow in the back, head between them. Emily told him everything. Her dad's notebook, the entry about the invisible drone, the synthetic thing with no scent. Whatever it was, she said, it wanted me to get on. Mason stayed quiet for a long time. Then, I've seen weird ops. Deep stuff. Government tech. Field tests. Covert gear. But none of it explains this. So where do we start? She asked. We start with Shadow, Mason said. If he found it once, he might again. They returned to the site of the bus stop. Shadow sniffed the curb, then the road, then the air. No hesitation. He trotted forward, tail stiff, head low, moving with the certainty of a dog on a mission. Emily and Mason followed on foot, staying close. He led them 5 blocks west, then turned sharply north, past the industrial district, past the railway yard, through a chain-link fence with a broken lock. An abandoned vehicle depot loomed ahead, once owned by a bus company that went bankrupt years ago. Of course, Mason muttered. Nobody checks records for defunct lots. They moved carefully now, weapons drawn, Mason with his service pistol, Shadow with nothing but teeth. Emily stayed between them, flashlight in hand. The building was hollowed-out steel and dust. Concrete floors. Rows of broken-down vehicles covered in tarps. Shadow stopped near the back. A tarp fluttered in the breeze. Beneath it, a yellow curve. Emily pulled the cover back. A school bus. Number 306. Up close. The illusion shattered. The paint was too clean. The rubber on the tires had no wear. The windows were tinted solid black. No license plate. No insignia. Mason pulled the door open with effort. It creaked like it hadn't been touched in days. They stepped inside. It wasn't a bus. Not really. The driver's seat was there, but there was no steering wheel. No pedals. No dashboard. Just an empty space where a human should have been. Instead, mounted to the walls and ceiling were surveillance systems, small black domes with lenses inside. Humming faintly, every seat had wires running beneath it. And behind the final row, where backpacks usually landed. There was something worse. A synthetic panel, hooked with blinking modules. A voice modulator, speaker coils, sound filters. Emily stepped forward, reaching out. Mason caught her wrist. "Don't touch it." "Why?" she asked, breath shallow. He scanned the wiring. "This isn't surveillance. It's collection." "What?" They weren't watching. They were studying. Shadow growled low in his throat. Mason turned and looked up at the walls again. "No human made this on their own," he said. "Not out here. Not quietly." Emily looked back at the driver's station. No controls. No engine. Just space. Just imitation. "Who built it?" she whispered. Mason shook his head. "I don't know." Outside, the sun was beginning to set. The air felt thicker now. Emily looked back at the warehouse as they crossed the fence line. "It pretended to be part of our world," she said, "but it wasn't, and no one noticed." Mason added, "Because it looked right. Except to Shadow." They both turned. Shadow stood by the fence. Ears perked, staring into the trees. He growled again. And this time, the sound didn't fade. It rose. Louder. Deeper. Until it echoed across the lot. Mason drew his weapon. Emily reached for her phone. And in the shadows between the trees, something moved. Not a person. Not an animal. A shape. Tall. Too still. As if testing them. Watching. The auditorium was packed. Not with noise. But with something heavier. Expectation. Curiosity. And the low hum of whispered conversations. Rows of students sat stiff in their folding chairs. Parents leaned in the back, unsure whether this was supposed to feel like a school assembly or something more. On stage stood a podium. Behind it, the American flag. The district seal. A hand-painted banner that read, "Service comes in many forms." Emily Tran adjusted the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly. Her shoes felt too loud on the wooden stage floor. Beside her sat Shadow, wearing a navy blue K9 vest with a new patch sewn to one side. Civilian K9 Honorary Service. Pinned just below the patch was a miniature metal badge. It gleamed under the lights. He didn't seem to notice it. He just sat quietly, ears alert, tail resting on the floor, eyes focused straight ahead, as always. Emily took a breath and leaned forward. "Most people think danger is loud," she said. Her voice echoed across the room. Thinner than she wanted, but steady. "They think when something bad is coming. You'll hear it. You'll know." She paused. "But not all danger works like that. Some of it wears a mask. Some of it copies what's safe. Pretends to belong." She looked down at Shadow. "And sometimes, the only one who notices is the quiet one standing next to you." She turned back to the crowd. "Shadow pulled me out of the path of something I didn't see. Something I couldn't see. At first, I thought he was wrong. That he'd snapped. That he didn't know what he was doing." Her voice tightened. "Just slightly. But he did. He always did." Silence. Not a phone buzzed. Not a whisper. Emily's throat burned. But she pressed on. "My dad was a K9 handler. Shadow was his partner. I used to think the job was about chasing bad guys. But it wasn't. It was about trust. About moving together. Listening. Even when the world said you were wrong. She stepped aside and placed a hand gently on Shadow's back. Shadow saw the danger. I didn't, but next time, I'll believe him the first time. A soft murmur of applause began. Then grew louder. Shadow blinked slowly, unfazed by the noise. He wasn't here for the praise. He was here for her. The principal came forward, presenting the badge. Officer Mason clipped it onto Shadow's vest. A camera flash went off. A reporter from the local news leaned forward, scribbling notes. Shadow sat through it all without flinching. When it was over, he walked beside Emily back through the crowd. Students parting like water as the shepherd moved through their ranks. Not barking. Not wagging. Just walking. Like a soldier still on patrol. That night, the house was quiet again. Emily sat on the porch steps. The award certificate in one hand. The badge case in the other. Shadow lay beside her, stretched across the boards, nose twitching at the breeze. You know they wanted me to give a speech and say you were brave. She said softly. He didn't react. She smirked. I didn't. Shadow's ear flicked. I said you were right. That's harder than brave. The wind carried the smell of rain. A storm coming. Maybe. Somewhere distant. Emily leaned back on her hands. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know where it went. But I know this. She turned to face him. Whatever comes next, if you so much as blink weird. I'm listening. Shadow's head turned slightly, meeting her eyes. For just a second, she could have sworn he smiled. A few weeks later, an ordinary morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains. The house smelled like toast and coffee. Birds chirped lazily in the trees. The world was quiet again. Emily zipped up her jacket and grabbed her backpack. Her mom called out from the kitchen. Be careful. I will. She opened the door. Shadow trotted out behind her, nails tapping softly against the porch wood. They walked to the edge of the driveway together. Emily stopped. The school bus waited at the corner, its windows smudged. Exhaust pipe rattling gently, exactly like it always had. Only this time, Emily didn't take a step. Shadow had stopped, too. He stood perfectly still, ears cocked forward. Then he looked at her. A breath passed. Then another. He didn't growl, didn't pull, just waited. And that was enough. Emily smiled. She crouched beside him and ran her hand over his back. You didn't even have to bark this time, she whispered. She stood again, then looked him in the eye and said, if next time you drag me away again, I'll believe you. No questions, no arguing. Shadow blinked once, slowly, then, just once, his tail thumped gently against the ground. The school bus door opened with a hiss. But it didn't matter. She didn't move until he moved. Not anymore.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.